Hey therapists, I think we all know that work doesn't end when the session does. There's the notes, the scheduling, the billing, the insurance follow-ups. All of the admin work can quietly take over your nights and weekends, and I know this to be true because I have done it myself for many years. But recently, Psychologist Off the Clock co-hosts Debbie, Emily, and Jill convinced me to try out Simple Practice, and I'm so glad I did. Simple Practice is an all-in-one EHR that is HIPAA compliant, high-trust certified, and built specifically for therapists. The beautiful thing is that it brings all the things together that you would otherwise have to do in piecemeal fashion. That's scheduling, billing, insurance, client communication. It's all in one place so you're not juggling multiple systems just to run your practice. I love that the forms are customizable and make documentation much faster and less draining, and I really appreciate that I don't have to spend hours each month generating invoices for clients. What's more, if you're just starting out or growing your practice, they also have a credentialing service that helps you to get paneled independently. It takes the total headache out of the insurance enrollment, giving you full autonomy over your own contracts without any middleman platforms taking a cut. If you are ready to simplify the business side of your practice, now is a great time to try Simple Practice. Start with a 7-day free trial, then get 50% off your first 3 months. Just go to simplepractice.com to claim the offer. Again, that's simplepractice.com.
What's different about it from traditional cognitive therapy techniques is that it's all about the process of thinking. Like, what is my mind doing right now and what is the impact it's having on me? Rather than the content, we wouldn't try to argue against it, just trying to notice it and not take it as seriously as it wants us to take it.
That was Matt Boone on Psychologists Off the Clock. We are 5 experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, author of Act for Burnout and Act Daily Journal.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Harold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and the author of an upcoming book on developing your confidence and social skills.
From Boston, I'm Dr. Yael Schoenbrunn, faculty at Brown University and author of Work, Parent, Thrive, and Why Don't You Understand Me?
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Hey listeners, just a super quick reminder that you can listen to the podcast ad-free by supporting us on Patreon for just $5 a month. Or you can support the podcast with a one-time donation on Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you to everyone who's already supporting us.
Hey listeners, it's Jill here. You are about to dive into my interview with the wonderful ACT therapist and trainer, Matt Boone. And the two of us got so into this conversation that it ran a little long. So for that reason, we are not going to have a co-host post at the end of this episode. But I hope you enjoy my conversation with Matt Boone. Hey everybody, it's Jill here, and I have a guest back today who joined us back in 2020. I cannot believe it's been 6 years, but I have Matt Boone with me today. Matt Boone is a social worker, psychotherapist, and author who specializes in translating mental health concepts for the general public. His books include the Acceptance and Commitment Therapy Skills Workbook, co-authored with Jennifer Gregg, and Stop Avoiding Stuff, 25 Micro Skills to Face Your Fears and Do It Anyway, co-authored with Jennifer Gregg and Lisa Coy. Matt is also the Associate Director at the Student Wellness Program at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, an instructor in the Department of Psychiatry, and former Clinical Director of Mental Health Coaching at Lyra Health, where he oversaw the clinical development of Lyra's mental health coaching program and offered workshops and webinars on mental health topics to workers in the tech industry. At Cornell University, he oversaw the development of Let's Talk, an outreach program that has since been replicated at nearly 100 other colleges and universities. He lives and works in Little Rock, Arkansas with his wife, guitars, and cats, Georgia, a sassy tortie, and Finley, a gentle giant orange kitty with a superhuman or super kitty capacity for empathy. Oh, I love that. Matt, welcome back to the show.
I'm glad to be here. This is so exciting. It's always fun to talk to you.
So fun to talk to you. Last time you were here, we spent some time hanging out with our glasses upside down on our faces.
We were trying to be flexible.
And what we had talked about doing another episode, on Psychologists Off the Clock, we've now done well over 400 episodes, maybe 450. And so many of our episodes refer to, revolve around acceptance and commitment therapy and psychological flexibility. But it's been a really long time since we just did kind of a straight ACT episode. So we thought we would have this conversation as kind of an ACT refresher. I think the last episode that was just about acceptance and commitment therapy was episode 77, before I was a host and I was the interviewee coming to talk about my big book of ACT metaphors. So I think we're overdue. We have lots of new listeners since that time. So to start, why don't you tell us how do you think of ACT? What is acceptance and commitment therapy?
Well, my elevator pitch is ACT is based on the bit of wisdom and science that we all know intuitively, but none of us put into practice, which is that if you have something you don't like inside you, if you try to push it away, it's likely to become stronger, either in that moment or over time. And so rather than teaching you ways to get rid of the hard stuff, ACT teaches you ways to live alongside the hard stuff so it has less power over you, doesn't overwhelm you, and gives you space to put your energy into what you care about in your life, which is the commitment part of acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yeah, well said. I love it. It's a great definition.
Thank you.
So how did you discover ACT?
Well, before I was a therapist, I was a chronic pain patient. Before chronic pain had the name chronic pain, at least that I knew. In my early 20s, I was an aspiring musician, so much so that I quit school after 1 year at UC Berkeley and moved to Los Angeles with my band in 1990. So think when hard rock was transforming into something more cool than hair metal. So Jane's Addiction, Faith No More, Red Hot Chili Peppers, about a year before
like the
Nirvana.
grunge years?
Yeah, right before Nirvana hit.
Yep.
I can't claim that the band was as good as any of those bands, and we broke up. But I came back, and I kept playing. I'd been a musician, singer-songwriter since I was a teenager, played in bands, and I was gigging a lot. And then I started having pain in my right hand. And then in about 2 weeks, I had pain in my left hand. And then about a month later, I had pain all through my arms. And it just didn't go away. And suddenly I was needing things like disability accommodations, which I had no idea existed in 1993 or 4.
Yeah.
But Cal Berkeley, first place ever in the country to have disability accommodations long before I got there. And I was an English major, so I had to have note takers on my classes. In those days, I had to stand up in front of a class of 400 people and say, would someone take notes? I can't use my hands. We'll pay you $5 an hour. Helps to be an extrovert for that one. And I had to sit next to people who would type at my Apple IIc Plus my English papers as I said them off the top of my head, which was like torture.
Yeah.
And I couldn't play my instrument. And I had no idea what was going on because no doctor could give me a diagnosis that stuck or led to a treatment that worked. Mm-hmm. But what worked was that I went to psychotherapy. And in 1993, you could have a psychotherapist in the Bay Area in California who was into Thich Nhat Hanh and acceptance and teach you meditation. And I did yoga, and that helped too. But none of the medical stuff helped. The stuff that helped me have a different relationship with my pain was the stuff that made a difference. And I had this little epiphany one day. I was in a lot of pain, and I was doing what I usually do when I'm in a lot of pain, which was like worrying about it, wondering where it came from, criticizing myself for doing too much to evoke it, just in a loop of ruminating and problem solving. And then I remembered something my yoga instructor had said, which was, you're really afraid of pain, aren't you? Because I was a little bit reluctant to go into a pose. At that point, I was like, well, heck yes, I'm afraid of pain. And in that moment, a couple weeks later, it's like, oh my God, I'm really afraid of this pain. And I started making this connection between like, there's the pain and then there's all the stuff my mind adds to it.
Right.
And those are totally different.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my therapist has been trying to teach me that indirectly. Indirectly hit me in that moment. And then that's a lesson I learned like 40 million more times over and over again, and learned that my brain said and what I felt were two different things. And what my brain said often made what I felt a lot worse. So I went from being pretty disabled and living with my parents and not knowing what my future was going to look like to just trying to be as bold as I could and challenge my assumptions. And it got me to social work school. And I really wanted to be a therapist because, hey, what's the most important thing in my life? The therapy I did. And when I got into practice, I didn't really know how to translate these concepts into like actual practice with my clients. Like no one wanted to meditate. And I couldn't put into words what I had experienced. And then I saw Steve Hayes at a Boston conference on meditation and psychotherapy. And he was hella funny. And he was kind of speaking my language, but way better than I spoke it. He suddenly had this model and a set of techniques and a kind of way of thinking that you could actually teach clients through experience, and also an emerging research program. And I was hooked, and I went to a 2-day workshop with him. And from then on, I walked out of that workshop and I was like, I'm an ACT therapist now. Everything I'm going to do is ACT. I'm going to learn ACT by just being an ACT therapist. And I took any kind of problem solving and any kind of content related things and stuck them in my back pocket. And I just made myself do only ACT for the next 5 years. And I went to every workshop I could and read every book I could and was on the ACT listserv. And it just was a big loudmouth in the community trying to learn as much as I could.
Yeah. And now you're a peer-reviewed ACT trainer. So for people who don't know, newer listeners, so Steve Hayes is the developer of ACT. And then in the ACBS community, the Association for Contextual and Behavioral Sciences, which is, the professional association where ACT and third wave therapists hang out, you can get certified to be a peer-reviewed ACT trainer, which Matt and I both are. And do you still have your intro to ACT? Is that still an evergreen course through Praxis?
Yeah. So I am so lucky. I feel like I have a horseshoe up up some part of my body. That I was chosen by this company to do their intro ACT course. And I did it twice. I did it the first one they ever did when they were trying to figure out how to do it. And then I redid it. It's called ACT Basics, Praxis Continuing Education and Training. It's 8 hours of CEs, and it's meant to be as experiential as possible and as self-oriented as possible. So you learn by doing ACT with yourself. Yeah. So I've sort of specialized in intro to ACT.
Yeah. And you're so good at it. So there's an ACT boot camp that I think it's still taught twice a year. It's usually once on the West Coast, once on the East Coast. And I actually attended when it was in San Diego, and I was living in San Diego, and I was already an ACT peer review trainer. I had already written ACT books. You're at that stage where you're like, I don't have that much left to learn. But I went to that ACT boot camp, and not only did I still learn more about doing ACT effectively, but I learned so much from you as a trainer. Like I learned how to be a better trainer and better presenter after watching you teach the intro stuff for Intro to ACT. So for any of our clinicians listening that want to learn more about ACT and need CEs, I really do recommend Matt as a trainer. He's awesome.
Thank you, Jill. I'll just say that you've told me that before, and that's like one of the single best pieces of feedback I've ever received in my career. So I'll just savor that one more time.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm glad. Well, so it sounds pretty obvious that ACT has changed your life and your experience, obviously with respect to pain and medical issues. What else? Like, I do think it's one of those therapies where I don't know any ACT therapists who don't live ACT in their own lives. And that is certainly true for me. And, it's funny, I may have said this on the podcast before, but I have an anxiety and OCD specialty clinic. And I often tell my clients, sort of in the beginning stages when I'm talking about ACT and cultivating psychological flexibility, that I am more anxious than I've ever been. And they kind of give me this look like, wait, what? But I'm coming to see you to be less anxious and you're more anxious. But what I explain is that it's anxiety I choose, that prior to learning ACT, I lived a really small life. I didn't take risks. I didn't do anything that felt scary or risky or where I might be rejected or I might fail. And now I do huge, big, bold things that are really, really scary, but it's that anxiety I choose. And it also comes along with the meaning and the purpose and the vitality that comes with being brave and doing big things. Would you agree with that? That like pretty much everyone I know who's an ACT therapist lives ACT in their own life. And like, in what way has that changed your life for you?
Yeah. Well, the first thing it did is it made a big impact on my practice. And I feel like my practice is a big part of my personal life. I've tried my best to be the same guy in my life with fewer swear words and less juvenile jokes in my office, right? And it just became this thing where I no longer was so worried about whether or not someone's depression went down 2 or 3 ticks on the BDI between sessions. And in the middle of sessions, I didn't feel this sense of panic when feelings showed up and were powerful. Mm-hmm. I suddenly had this freedom that it was not my job to solve any of that, but that I had a whole other toolbox of ways to relate to that in a way that made it so much less scary to me. And then that was something I could model to my clients and actually show them how to live out, to not be so scared of their thoughts and feelings. And wow, that's burnout prevention right there for me. I don't think I've ever come close to burnout with clinical work, just because I'm not feeling responsible. Although I would say that my clinical population, I often work with university students. So there's probably some much more severe populations where no matter what you do, burnout shows up. I don't want to claim I'm burnout free, but definitely made me enjoy my practice more. Suddenly people were coming into my office and saying, hey, guess what I did? Instead of, I feel a little less depressed this week, Yes. And it was like they asked that person out. They spoke to a professor. They got on a phone call with their parent who drives them crazy and did not get into a fight. They had this model for living out values.
Like actual behavior change.
And they rarely left my office without something to think about or try. And I could see the changes happening. And it was so exciting to watch. And that moment where someone kind of discovers for the first time, although they have to learn it a million times, as we all do, that they don't have to fight with a sadness, an anxiety, a critical thought. That's such a fun moment when you're there with them and they discover that.
Yeah.
And they go from looking at you like you're insane because you're talking about it to looking at you like, what the heck did you just do? Because they're now experiencing it. That's the other thing about ACT that was so appealing and makes therapy so fun for me is it's experiential. And so we're often doing things in my office rather than just talking about things in a way that a client can feel and touch intuitively.
I will say, this was one of the biggest mic drop moments for me. And the longer I do this job, the more I realize that the mic drop moments are always common sense. You just haven't realized the common sense yet.
That's right.
And so one of those things was, I don't remember if I first heard it from Steve Hayes or somewhere else, but this idea that we hurt where we care. And, like I often say to clients, like, think about the last time you were laying awake at 2 a.m. with your wheels spinning, right? Everybody's been there. What is it that you were worrying about? Mm-hmm. I'm going to guess it wasn't that Game of Thrones isn't coming back for another season, even if it was your favorite show of all time, right? Like, you worry about your family and being competent at work and the state of the world, like these things we care about. And I often tell this story, and I've probably told it here before, but about this time where, like how they say it's just like riding a bike to mean you can get back to something skillfully without practicing. Well, I had not been on a literal bike in 10 years. And I got back on a bike and I immediately crashed. So for me, riding a bike was not just like riding a bike, but I spent 0 seconds worrying about it, right? Because I don't give a shit about my ability to pedal a 2-wheeled machine. However, that crash triggered all these other thoughts about how my kids were 8 and 10 and still didn't know how to ride a bike and what a horrible mother I must be. And doesn't that really show you the difference? Like, I didn't have any worry or anxiety or, tough feelings around the crash because I don't care about how I ride a bike, but I had lots of thoughts and feelings around my mothering because I care deeply about being a good mother. And it's like so obvious, but it ends up being kind of a mic drop for all of my clients. Like once you see it, you're like, oh, duh. Why did that not ever occur to me before? So that means like the only way I can avoid feeling these hard feelings is to stop doing everything I care about. And that's a shitty trade-off.
That is a shitty trade-off. And it's hard, sometimes the anxiety, the sadness, the grief, the whatever it is that you have to encounter were you to do the important thing is really scary. And
it is. It's hard.
And there's also this kind of piece of the ACT model, which is that this is universal. This is evolutionarily shaped, that of course you do this, like you and everyone else. Kelly Wilson had this he probably got it from someone else, but I saw it in a workshop with him. He's another ACT treatment developer. He's a character and very charismatic and does great workshops. And he would say, how do you know you have a problem where you think there's something wrong with you? And then he says, here, put your fingers right there on your wrist. And
feel your pulse.
Feel that little pulse. That's how you know. I whip that out about once a year in my office.
That. I love that.
That's who we are. That's who we are. And we're built to worry. We're built to ruminate. We're built to avoid. But we also have all the skills necessary under the right conditions to not let those things run our life or to not give energy to those things.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I point out to clients is, okay, let's take an example. So let's say you had used an example earlier about like asking somebody out. Okay. So you want to ask somebody out, but you're really scared. You're afraid you're going to be rejected, that they're not going to like you, that they're going to judge you. And that's really painful. And the only way to avoid that pain is to not ask the person out. And there you go. Boom. You have relief. You've gotten to avoid that pain. But now what do you have? Regret, feeling bad that I let my anxiety be in charge of what I did, et cetera, et cetera. So what I always say to clients is the bad news is no matter what you do, you're going to have to feel something you don't want to feel. But that is also the good news, because if that's true, then we don't have to let our feelings be in charge. We don't have to let them be in the driver's seat because we're going to have to feel something uncomfortable no matter what. So in that case, let's let our values be in charge.
Right. And when I say I learned to speak more to that part of them that doesn't want to be in pain just a little bit in the beginning and say, and by the way, this is not an invitation for life to suck for you. This is an invitation to learn a new way to be alongside those feelings so they don't have so much power. And sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not, but they don't run your life the way they do now.
Right. And I'll add to that too, is like, I'll sometimes say to folks, this is not no pain, no gain therapy. It's not like there's some glory in feeling pain. And I love this metaphor of like, imagine there's a beautiful mountain off in the distance in front of you. And it's really important to you to travel to this mountain and to get to this mountain. But in between you and the mountain is a big, giant, stinky, sticky swamp. If the only way to get to the mountain is through the swamp, you go through the swamp. But if there's a bridge, cross the bridge.
Yeah.
Right? Or if the swamp is really just a puddle and you can walk around it and it's not going to take a lot of extra time, then walk around it. So there's nothing wrong with things that make you comfortable or soothe your nervous system, or like if it's an easier, there's nothing wrong with using your dishwasher instead of hand washing your dishes, as long as there is no cost to that. But as soon as those shortcuts come at the cost of your values, then, we want to start thinking about alternatives.
I think that's really lovely. I often say, ACT is not about eliminating avoidance. ACT is about being aware where avoidance is showing up and what the impact is, and then making a choice.
Yes,
so
I love that.
That could even include making a choice to do the same old avoidance this time because it's just not the day for you.
Right.
To challenge yourself to kind of make space for that pain and do the thing that's really scary.
Yeah, sometimes that can be in the service of the value of self-care.
That's right. So I always think don't think so much about like eliminating avoidance or always living your values. Think about like don't think about just this moment. Think about the arc of your life. Is this the time? Is this the moment where you want to take that challenge and like take one step towards something meaningful that might be a little bit uncomfortable? But I'm not giving you a new set of rules that you have to always follow.
Right. Yes, right. Because we're trying to step away from rule-governed behavior and make those flexible choices in each moment.
Yeah.
And a choice to do something today might be a choice to not do the very same thing tomorrow.
That's right. And that's the nerdy behavioral thing I love about ACT 2, because ACT was born out of behavior analysis, and which you'd never know from doing ACT because it's so fluffy. Or it can be so fluffy. Is that like, it seemed so obvious when I heard it the first time, like, of course, but often we're not thinking this way. In ACT, you're encouraged to think about the function of the behavior, like what purpose it serves, like how, and in technical terms, how it's been reinforced historically, what evokes it historically, and what does the person get out of it? And then what are the consequences over time of always getting that little payoff to the behavior, which is just another way of describing what you described about, not doing the scary thing of asking someone out and then we're having regret. But when you do that with every behavior, then behavior becomes so interesting. And as I've been training people to do ACT, I'm now working with residents, psychiatry residents, who they don't get a lot of psychotherapy training. And they think what we might call topographically, understandably, which is like, what does the surface look like? Because they're like specialists in DSM diagnoses, which are all like, this many symptoms of this many symptoms for how long qualifies as a diagnosis. But they often aren't thinking, why does the person do that behavior? And what life history has shaped that behavior to be so powerful? And that's a little bit of it's a shift. It's a shift. It's a little bit of a head exploding moment sometimes that like, like a behavior like taking a drink of alcohol could have like a million different functions for a million different people under a million different circumstances. Right. It doesn't all mean one thing, I always say to people, it works or you wouldn't do it. It's that simple. Yeah. Right. Like they'll be like, I'll say, what's the benefit of, procrastinating? Nothing. There's no benefit. But there is, or you wouldn't do it. Right. Like the minute you give yourself permission to put off this dreaded task, what do you get? And they're like, oh, relief. Right. There you go. And now tomorrow, same amount to do and less time to do it. So there goes that. But it works in the moment or you wouldn't do it. There's that function. Yeah. Actually, procrastination is a great example. I mean, I work with people studying medical professions. So it's, my patients are medical students, nursing students, PA students, pharmacy students, public health students, all at this medical university of the University of Arkansas. And everyone procrastinates, almost. And all of them have like a pretty oversimplified story of why they procrastinate. It's like, I'm lazy or I can't kind of get going in the morning. And I'll say, how about if I have a theory about what procrastination is about. Would you be willing to do something a little bit uncomfortable? And I say, pull out your laptop. What are you not doing right now? How about if you take the first step? And then this is my introduction to like being present with what shows up. Like, what's your mind saying? What's showing up in your body? What do you feel like doing? What are your urges? Sometimes I'll make it a little safer by just writing all those things on 3x5 cards and mapping them out on like an ottoman in my office. And I was like, that's why you're procrastinating. Of course. Who wants to, pointing to the gnarliest thought, like I'm never going to be as good as the rest of my colleagues and I'm going to be a horrible doctor. Like, who wants to be around that thought? Right. Right. And the thing that I was thinking about earlier with values is I'll often do these kinds of like little active exposure kind of exercises around things people are avoiding. And then there's, it's still like, okay, I don't feel so wrapped up in this stuff right now. I could imagine they might even start their assignment in my office just to kind of get going. And then if I say, or have the time to say, now wait, let's back up just one more second, big picture before we do anything else. Why medical school? And then we get into whatever that story is, that like that thing about that grandmother who, didn't get the right care when they were growing up, or being there for a family member who got the best care and how amazing it was to watch people care for others, like the wanting to make a difference thing that got them there. And then I'm like, so do you think you could stay with this like beating heart and this little pit in your stomach for about 5 or 10 minutes till it passes, as you predict it usually does, in the service of that.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
And they're like, oh, right.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't ask you to do this for nothing.
Yeah, like you're really connecting them to their why in such a like deep and heartfelt way.
The best summer pieces are the ones you end up wearing on repeat. Comfortable, versatile, and somehow right for almost every occasion. That's why I love Quince. They make elevated essentials using premium materials like European linen, organic cotton, and washable silk without the traditional retail markup. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middleman, so you're paying for exceptional quality rather than brand markup. On a more personal note, for about a decade, my bags have said, "Functional Mom." The Sloan hand-woven mini shoulder bag just arrived at my house, and the gorgeous weave detail says, "Stylish woman who has places to be." Both are true. One of them just hasn't had a good bag in a while. But it's not just apparel. Quince also has elevated essentials for your home, from bedding and bath to kitchen essentials and furniture. Make your summer wardrobe feel easier. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/POTC for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC.
If the world were like a Sleep Number mattress, everything would adapt for your comfort. Your coffee would never get cold. Your flight would always be on time. And your mattress would always respond to you and your unique sleep needs. Sleep Number mattresses are designed to respond to your body and shift with your changing life, helping you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. To experience a whole new world of comfort, visit a Sleep Number store or go to sleepnumber.com. Sleep Number. To a good life sleep.
Well, let's talk about values while we're on this topic, because, you know, of course, like we talk about values on the podcast all the time. And I think probably by now most of our listeners pretty much know what we mean when we're saying that.
Sick to death of values.
They're probably sick to death of it. But people describe values in so many different ways. So like, tell us, like, what is your take? How do you talk to clients about what values are and what they're not? And then, you know, how do you help them kind of clarify that? Because of course, none of us go, so what are your values?
Right.
Like, that's not a thing. If you're doing that, you might need a little more ACT training.
That's right. So, you know, often I like to teach everything experientially the first time if I can. Yeah. So if we do something, if I'm going to show them acceptance, I'm going to show, not tell to start with. I took that really seriously when I was forcing myself to learn ACT. So the rule I followed was do it experientially first before you use any words. Mm-hmm. And so that's a little hard with values, but I am a big fan of the values card sorting task that you can get if you get Jenna Lejeune and Jason Loma's book, Values in Therapy. And I usually start with that these days. And I say, okay, so here's these like 50 cards and they have words on them. And those words are like compassion or hard work or contributing, right? I say, these are like big principles, but notice that the way they are defined usually starts with TO, to be, to try, to make an effort to be conscious of, like it's a way of ongoing being, not what you have and not what you feel. So it could say empathy as the principle, but of course you're not going to feel empathic all day long every day. So that's not what we're looking for. We're just looking for, if you look back on your life, how would you want to have lived it? Mm-hmm. And so then we'll do that exercise. They'll pick, I do it my own way. I make them pick 10. And then I say, is there one in there that you thought, well, that's not really me, but it would be nice if it was me. And I say, make that the 11th. Any more of those? Great. Because this is talking about your life moving forward, not now. Like, who do you want to grow into in your behavior? Because what you can control is what you do, assuming they work as designed with your hands, your feet, and your voice. You may feel angry, but you can have that conversation with your partner in a loving way. You know, you may feel like you are so right, but you could also take a deep breath and really listen to what someone else is saying and try to be understanding of where they're coming from. Those are the things we have control over much more easily than what shows up in our minds and our hearts in any given moment. And so I say, so the idea in ACT is maybe we let this guide our behavior more often than like trying to stay away from pain, and we can have more choice. And then I usually say, okay, turns out values are really easy. You get A pluses and values all the time. So like they'll have these like 11 words here. I say, what have you done already today that fits one of these words? I think really, really small. Oh, well, I guess I kissed my wife on the way out the door. It's like, you did it. Loving you've already A plus today. You know, just try to encourage them not to think in giant terms of it. It's like, this is just every day how you want to live. It's about now, but it's also about the course of your life.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a really important thing to point out, is this idea that the small stuff really matters. And this hit me like a ton of bricks. This was years ago. I was living in San Diego working at the VA before I had kids, and my daughter just graduated 8th grade yesterday. I can't believe she's going to high school. But so this was a long, long time ago. And I used to drive a red convertible Mini Cooper. I loved this car so much. Car. And it's the absolute best. And I've told my family, like, once my kids can drive, they can drive the family SUV, and then mom's getting another convertible Mini Cooper. However, that is not the point here. The point is, I was booting down the left-hand lane on the 5 South.
Booting.
And you know, I'm from Boston, so we tend to drive a little bit aggressively. And I'm in the left lane and I'm going fast because fast cars like to drive fast and Mini Coopers are fast. And, you know, there's somebody driving really slowly in front of me. And of course, I'm like all righteous and pissed off. And so what do? Like any good Bostonian, I tailgate. I get right up on this person's butt. And in that moment, I just stopped and I went, really, Jill? Like, is this what you want to be about in your life? Like a girl that's going to like intimidate strangers into driving faster or changing lanes? Like, no, that's not what I want to be about in my life. And so it like, that was a moment where like, I don't know this person. I'm never going to meet this person. My choice in this moment is going to have 0 consequences for me or anyone else. But it was just about, how do you want to show up in this one present moment? And I wanted to be somebody who is, you know, a courteous citizen, not an intimidating bully.
Despite being
from Boston. And so I, you know, swallowed my Boston nature and I backed off. And that was that. And like, it didn't make me less irritated. I still wanted to drive fast, but I also felt better about the fact that I wasn't just acting impulsively, being driven by my irritation. I was making a choice to show up in a way that was consistent with who and how I want to be in the world.
Yeah. And you know, the thing that goes along with that I'm sure was operating as well, is that in ACT, we try to kind of be a little skeptical about what our mind says without getting in a fight with it. And so while you're doing that, it's aided by the sense that, you know, this righteousness that I feel is probably like a habit of my mind. As true as it feels in this moment, I bet in an hour from now, it's not going to feel nearly this true.
Right.
I don't have to listen to this, even though it's so good. I just want to, you know, it's like the best dessert on earth is to be righteous, you know?
Yeah. Right. And that's another example of like, it works or you wouldn't do it. What do you get out of tailgating? You get sort of that, like that release, that righteous indignation, that.
I love to be right more than anything on earth. And 98% of the time, it does not serve me in any way, shape, or form. Right. Professionally or personally. I actually have a really good professional value story that I'll try to think about as I say, because it's got a little content warning in it, because it was about a report to Child Protective Services that I had to do. So I worked for a tech company for a while, and I ran this coaching program. And in one of the coaching sessions, we listened to audio. It sounded like a person had done something that required something on the minor end of things, but still required a call to Child Protective Services. And I'm the mandated reporter. And so I had to call. I believe that if it's safe for you as a clinician, then it is the most respectful thing to do for a client to tell them that you're going to do this. Mm-hmm. You know, if it puts you in any danger, that's a whole other different world. But I kind of feel this is the respect I want to show somebody. And so I had to call a person out of the blue to tell them that I was going to make this report. And a person, I listened to the whole session. This is a person who cared. who was doing the best they could, I thought. And I was shaking, making this call. My hand was shaking. My mouth was dry. I knew I was just going to stutter through the whole thing, just being nervous. And I paused and I just wrote out like 5 or 6 values. Like, how do I want to be in this conversation? I want to be caring. I want to be direct. I want to hold my assumptions lightly about who this person is. I don't know what the words are. I'm just making them up right now. I want to be gently firm. I want to be non-judgmental as humanly possible. And then I wrote down all the things I was going to feel. Like, what do I need to make space for? My heart racing, my dry mouth, my shaking hand, and the sense that I am like hurting somebody. And I had that call, and that was a really hard call. That person did not like me at all. And believe me, not liking me is kryptonite.
Yeah.
But when I got out of that conversation, I felt like a sort of sense of peace inside myself that I'd done it according to my values. And I showed up as the guy I wanted to be. And even though I had to do a really hard thing and someone's life was dramatically affected by it, I didn't even know who that person was. And it was the best thing I could have done for myself as a professional in that moment. So I
love this so much.
I had any trouble sleeping that night.
Yeah. Well, what I love about this is that it's totally intentional. You know, you're not just like going in there and winging it. You're being really intentional. But I especially love that you took a beat to sort of predict like what is going to make this difficult so that you're not completely caught off guard, so that you don't just leap straight back into your comfort zone, but that you're like, okay, I know these thoughts and feelings are going to show up. I'm going to have to make space for them, detach from them. These are the values. This is the committed action. And like having that sort of mapped out, I think is really skillful, especially because, you know, the more heightened that anxiety gets, the harder it's going to be to engage that frontal lobe, right? Like you're just going to be kind of in that fear space. And you were really making sure to do that in advance. I think that's really skillful.
Thank you. And I've found that predicting what I will feel in advance, it's not always entirely accurate, is already a moment of like acceptance work.
Acceptance.
It's like, oh yeah, this is going to show up. If I do this, I know myself well enough. That's not a character flaw. That's a thing that happens.
Right.
And so I'm not afraid of it quite so much.
Right. That's being human.
Yeah. And the whole act thing has made me it just made me a softer human.
Yeah.
Like I just want to, I don't know how to say this in a way that's not so mushy. Maybe it's also middle age. I could say that. But like men start crying in their 50s and 60s. I just want to be in a world where people are kind and loving to one another. And I can't make the world that way, but I can make my little world that way. And everything I'm in, I want to be in a space where I'm somehow contributing that kindness and lovingness.
You can be that way. And then you can be choosy about who you spend your time with. You know, you can't control the way they show up, but you can certainly decide who you are and aren't going to spend your very precious, that one non-renewable resource, time. I have definitely gotten much pickier about who I spend my time with as I've gotten older.
Yeah.
For sure. What would you say as an ACT therapist? Like, where do you find the biggest challenge, or like where clients maybe get the most stuck or have the hardest time moving forward in cultivating psychological flexibility?
Well, maybe we should define psychological flexibility.
Yeah, let's do that. So we know psychological flexibility is the one and only goal of ACT. So how do you define psychological flexibility?
You know what's really funny? This is just a side note. In the literature, it's always defined differently in every single resource. It's so absurd. So I try to make it as simple as possible. It's like letting go of fighting with what you can't fight inside you. Taking note of what your mind is doing and making choices about whether or not to follow where your mind might lead you, and putting your energy into what you care about behaviorally. And from a behavioral perspective, if you think on that level, this is a fun way to think of it too. It's like in places where you would really get narrow in your like repertoire of behaviors, like when you're scared or you're mad or something is threatening to you, learning to open up and like do new things in that space. So let's say the panic disorder patient, first thing they do when they feel something in their body is they attend to that and start interpreting it and trying to problem solve it. That's just one narrow, constricted response. That would be an inflexible response. And we just want to like open up those response possibilities and just say, what are other things that one could do in that moment that are much more effective for living and for not maintaining this problem? So I actually think in those terms more, but I talk more with my clients and when people I'm introducing this stuff to the first time in that kind of more plain language thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have actually found that clients almost get it better. Like I'll define psychological flexibility and they're like, okay, yeah. But then I'll say, so what psychological inflexibility is when you're reacting on autopilot with your thoughts and feelings in the driver's seat. And then they go, oh, okay, that I recognize. And so if psychological flexibility is the opposite, now I think I know what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. And then you have to disabuse them of the fact that in order to do that, they have to feel really good.
Well, do you think that's kind of the biggest obstacle is like getting people on board with the acceptance?
I think it would, honestly, after doing it I've now been doing ACT for 19 years. I can't believe I'm saying that. It depends on the person. It really depends. There's some people who just are like, they're so there so quickly. And of course, there's no perfect acceptance, right? But they're so just on board. And there's some people who are so on board verbally, like they can talk about it all day long, but they're still in the space of trying to control everything through the process of acceptance, which is paradoxical and isn't really what we're going after. And there are some people who are just like, I don't want to touch that, you know? And so I think as a clinician, adapting your intervention to where that person is without getting into a sort of in your mind, like, you're just not doing it right. If you would just accept about, some people, their life histories have been so served. I'm thinking of someone, say, like complex PTSD has been so served by a kind of like constant suppression, constant masking of real feelings, constantly denying to themselves the feelings that they feel, that like, you just can't leap into the deep end and get any benefit. You have to really, in behavioral terms, help them shape their behavior in this direction. And I got to make it as best as I can. I'm really clumsy because I want to go too fast. Like adapted or attuned to their level of what they're capable of, like taking on in terms of feeling something they don't want to feel or doing something that feels unsafe to them, but is really just doing a normal human behavior.
Right. Yeah, I think the two places where I run into some difficulty is whatever's coming up is like in the interpersonal domain, because you're only 50% in charge. And so I think people have a hard time kind of holding outcomes lightly. It's like, okay, I'm going to have this scary conversation. I'm going to make space for my fear and be assertive. Oh, it went terribly because the other person didn't respond the way that you want them to respond. And that happens all the time because the other person isn't in therapy and isn't, like working on these same things that you're working on. And so I think that willingness to keep moving forward in those domains, even though you might less frequently get the outcome you desire versus when you're doing something that's kind of just you.
Yes.
And that, right. And then the other place and this might be because like I said, I have an anxiety and OCD clinic. So I just happen to see this amongst all my clients, but intolerance of uncertainty is a real difficulty for people. And when what is uncertain feels literally life or death. So for example, like half my caseload right now has health anxiety.
Yeah.
And I've seen that skyrocket over the last several years.
I'm sure.
And I find that is a place, and that's where I get a little bit hung up, is like for them, that willingness toward uncertainty feels so hard because they genuinely feel like if they do that, they are writing their death certificate.
Yeah. I like to remind myself, and sometimes when I'm working with trainees, like, just remember what you're asking this person to do feels like jumping off a cliff.
Exactly.
So treat it with that kind of tenderness, even as you're saying you can do it.
Yeah. And that's why I also think it's so important to like practice and train and, not just like, okay, go practice willingness toward uncertainty about whether you're going to have stage 4 cancer, but like, how about you just go buy a curling iron without reading the reviews first, or, pop into a restaurant in your neighborhood that you've never been to and know nothing about. Or I love to ask the question because it helps people click. I say, if you read a book, do you read the last page first? And they always look at me like I'm nuts. No. When you watch a Netflix special, do you watch the last episode of the series first? No. Why not? Because it would ruin it. Right. Because the pleasure is in the uncertainty. So we know you're capable of not only tolerating uncertainty, but even enjoying uncertainty. So we need to be able to take that ability and help it, sort of let it generalize to some of these other areas, basically work our way up to it, because obviously, the health thing is the top of Mount Everest for you. So we'll work our way up, but we know that you can do it in these other contexts.
I always learn such great interventions from you, Jill. So I'm going to whip that one out next week when I get back to work after my vacation.
I love it. I know. This is why we all need to be talking to each other.
That's right.
Everyone in the ACT community is so creative and clever. I always learn new things from people.
And I would just say as a side note, that was the one thing that struck me the most at that first 2-day training with Steve Hayes was he said, the intervention doesn't matter. If it's ACT consistent, it's ACT. So if it helps the person become more flexible and more open to their thoughts and feelings, more connected to their values, then it's ACT. And so I took that really seriously. So I immediately started I hated the 50% of the ACT techniques I read about in books. I'm like, I'll never do that. I'll never do that. I'll never do that. And then I'll do them on my own. And then I started making myself do all those ones I didn't like as a flexibility exercise and discovered ones that I really liked. Anyway, I think that's where this creativity comes in, right? It's so fun because every day I can kind of make it up if I'm hanging out within these principles.
Yeah. And I have so many clients that come to session with their own metaphors, and nothing makes me happier when they sort of get the way metaphors and experiential exercises can be such a helpful element of ACT. And then they start bringing in their own metaphors. And then I end up learning so much from them. In fact, my favorite values exercise, which I've probably told this story on the podcast, but it came from a client. And I know other people do this and it's in other books, but the first time I learned of it was from a client who came in, who was she was all lit up about all these committed actions that she had done. And committed action is just walking the walk of your values. And I asked her, what was the secret? How'd you do it? And she goes, well, I just thought WWJD. And I started to spiral, what would Jesus do? Oh my God, she's religious. How did I not know this? I'm the world's worst therapist. And she jumps in and rescues me. And she goes, what would Jill do? And I'm like, oh, phew, I'm not the world's worst therapist. She's not religious. And so and she just said, whenever I had a choice to make, I would just thought well, if Jill were here, what would she do? Or what would she encourage me to do? So now when I work with clients, I have them pick their J. And I've even done it myself. The only reason I was able to get myself to do a TEDx talk was because I harnessed my J, who is Oprah, and asked what would Oprah do? And my very next thought was shit, because Oprah would do the talk, right? And then I was like, well, I guess I have to do the talk. And I did it in the presence of the most fear I've probably ever had up until that.
It's so interesting. I've seen that TEDx talk. I want to go back and watch it with that knowledge. She is channeling Oprah.
I was. Well, and if you've seen it, you've seen I look very different. I've lost 90 pounds since that TED talk. And, that was I grew up with parents who called me Tubby and Little Tubbette and Tubby 2x4. So my weight and body was such a tender button for me. And I had always yo-yoed, and I gained a lot of weight during COVID. And that's when this opportunity came up. And the thought of memorializing myself on that YouTube channel at that time, when I was just at my lowest low, I just didn't think I could do it. But then you think about Oprah. Not only would Oprah have done the talk, she would have done it at any size, because we saw her publicly, her body change. We saw her go through so much body shaming. And so she was a real inspiration to me to be able to live my values. And if I'm being honest, it's still really hard for me to look at pictures of myself then, to watch that TED talk. And I am so glad I did it. I am so glad I let my values make that decision for me, and not something as irrelevant as my body size.
That's so powerful. I mean, I'm really touched by hearing you say that, because I do work with eating disorders, so I talk about body all the time, and I just know how hard that can be to not let that be the deal breaker.
Yeah.
And how bold that must have been for you. And then again, Yes. And what has Oprah always done? I have some feelings for another podcast about, dieting, weight loss, and all those kinds of things, and the way Oprah has modeled that. But she has modeled a confidence and a self-love and just a putting it out there and being herself.
And a showing up. Yes.
Showing up no matter what's going on in her own mind or even in the public's mind about her body.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I would say for listeners, if you want to sort of use this as a values exercise for yourself, one thing that's important to know is when you choose your J or your O, you don't have to love every single thing about this person, right? Like Oprah has platformed some individuals I don't agree with, but she is authentic. She perseveres. She's overcome many obstacles. She's authentic. Like there are many qualities she does embody that are the qualities that I want to embody. And I've also had a number of clients pick two people and then smash their name together like Brangelina or Bennifer, like they do with celebrity couples. And so then it's like, what would Bennifer do? And you think about both of those people. I had one client who was talking about a person who was this real ambitious go-getter, and another one who really walked through the world with this equanimity. And they wanted to be able to do both of those things simultaneously. And I thought that was a really nice way to think about that exercise.
Yeah, and this is one of the risks with values. You mentioned rule-governed behavior earlier. Rule-governed behavior is just basically living by the implicit rules that we don't even know we have and just doing the thing we always do. A fairly good analogy in cognitive therapy is like a should. And values quickly become shoulds if you don't watch out. So it's like, my value is this, but I'm not doing it right. It's like, whoa. This is about enriching your life. If you're relating to your value in that way, that's not really a value. This is like a rule that you're using to beat yourself over the head with. Like, is it a hammer, like to beat yourself up with, or is it like something else? Is it like a sled to take you down the hill into a beautiful, bright, exciting life, Yeah,
I love it. All right, we're starting to come to the end of time. So we've talked about what is ACT, the goal of psychological flexibility and what it is. We've talked about values, committed action just being the walking of the actual, doing of the values. We've talked about acceptance and willingness and some challenges and obstacles. Talk about briefly, what is the role of mindfulness in ACT? And then let's talk a little bit briefly about fusion and diffusion.
Okay. So the role of mindfulness in ACT is whether or not you do a formal eyes closed, sitting, counting breaths, mindfulness exercise or not, we're bringing in that quality to all the other things we do. So if we are wanting to show up to a hard feeling, we're not ignoring the hard feeling. We are kind of from a small distance, metaphorically, watching without getting entangled in and without listening to what our mind is saying, this feeling we're having in our body, like that anxiety you have in your chest or your stomach or your shoulders when you feel anxious. So you're learning to just contact it as it is, not as your mind says it is. So hearkening back to my little epiphany that I had, which I had again about 1,000 times, was I learned I could just feel those feelings in my arm. And that's a very different experience from kind of half noticing the feelings and then being off all my worries. What am I going to do with my life if I can't use my hands? Those are so different experiences. Yeah. And so part of what happens in the office, hopefully, and in people's lives is that they learn to just mindfully be with the stuff that shows up. And that stuff can be anything, including thoughts, which brings us to fusion and diffusion. Fusion is like the way we usually live on autopilot, where we're looking at our world through the lens of our thoughts and meaning making generally. So it might not be something explicit, but you just see someone and you don't like them. There's no thought. There's just my habit is I don't like those people. And beginning to notice that that's happening, that is a process, that your mind is doing stuff. So your heart beats, your breath breathes, and your mind thinks. And it creates a world that is not necessarily serving you at all times. And so let's really intimately get to know the parts of those worlds that really hamstring you, get in your way. those thoughts that go along with what you call your imposter syndrome, or those thoughts that go along with the procrastination, the justifications for not doing the thing, or the story you tell yourself about the panic that I can't do it. It's gonna kill me. I can't stand that. And learning to hold that lightly and learning to kind of not let it dictate things.
Yeah.
And experiment in life with doing actions that don't follow from those things. It's not really in the definition of diffusion, but I never think of diffusion without action, because it's like you got to show yourself that the world operates differently from your mind. But what's different about it from traditional cognitive therapy techniques is that it's all about the process of thinking. Like, what is my mind doing right now, and what is the impact it's having on me, rather than the content. So we wouldn't call it a distortion. We wouldn't try to argue against it. Although sometimes we do that and it's effective, but in general, we're just trying to notice it and not take it as seriously as it wants us to take it. And the purpose for that is sometimes talking back to your thoughts, even if you're really logical and rational and compassionate, just leads to a fight in your mind. Although Absolutely. I don't want to condemn cognitive therapy in any way, because I use it and find it very helpful in the right context.
Well, I'll say, like, the way I present it to clients these days is I do this thing called the 3 C's: catch it, check it, change it. Catch the thought. That's the mindfulness piece, because we're
Right.
often thinking and not even aware that we're thinking.
Right.
Check it. Is it accurate, helpful, and healthy? And then change it. You can either change the content of the thought or change your relationship to it. So if it's a superficial thought, like I always use the example of traffic. This sucks. I'm going to be late. Don't these stupid people have jobs? That's an easy thought to change,
Yes.
right? Like,
I like
I'll
that.
get there when I get there. It's not the end of the world. Being mad isn't going to make the cars go any faster. And that like pulls down the intensity of the experience.
Yes.
But if you take a thought like I'm not good enough,
Right.
and then, right, like you read my entire CV to try to convince me I'm awesome, my brain goes, yeah, but, and
Yeah.
it completely backfires.
Yes.
And so it's back to what you were saying is about Steve Hayes says, as long as you're cultivating psychological flexibility, you're doing ACT. And so, what's another word for that? Workable behavior means I'm
Yeah.
living my life in line with my values. So if I can change the content of the thought in a way that makes it more likely that I'm going to live in line with my values, great. But a lot of times that backfires and it gives the thoughts more power, in which case we can do this other thing, which is the diffusion, changing the relationship, getting some separation, not taking the thought so seriously, recognizing if I listen to this thought as if it's a, truth with a capital T, it's not going to move me in the direction of my values. So what can I do differently?
And for the purposes of learning, I often say to people, we're already pretty good at challenging thoughts as therapists, or we're just as clumsy as any other therapist. Take that intervention and put it in your back pocket for like 6 months, so that this other thing is much harder for us to do, which is to not get into the content of the thought at all.
Right.
One of the simplest ways, my go-to these days is I just like, give me the top 5 thoughts that show up while you are procrastinating, or when you start not procrastinating, because that's when they're going to get loud. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go through really, visually, I'll show them on a piece of paper, or I'll have them written on 3x5 cards. I've got a little ottoman in my office, and we just look at them together, and I'll say, okay, tell me which ones of these are useful. And then they'll either give me like a percentage or like a yes or no. Like, for right now, for this purpose, for studying, is it useful? Almost always. And none of them are useful. Okay. Which ones are habitual?
All of them.
All of them. I mean,
Yeah.
Can we guarantee that if you go study right now, you're probably going to think at least 4 or 5 of these 5 thoughts are like, yeah. And I say, and which one? And then this speaks to the truth that they might have. Which ones of these are actionable right now? Is there anything you can do about these thoughts? I'll never measure up. Well, in one sense, it's not actionable because you can't make yourself measure up, because that's not even a thing. That's something your mind created, right? Mm-hmm. Or you could just get started working and not think about that so much, And usually and then the last question is, well, what's the next thing you would do if you weren't listening to these thoughts? I always take diffusion into action, because people often say, okay, my mind's been saying this. Now what do I do? I'm like, live your life in the tiny ways and the big ways that you do.
Yeah. I've been talking a lot lately too about like, sometimes this requires a leap of faith. And if you think about faith in the context of religion, you're choosing to believe in God in the absence of data, in the absence of certainty, right? So that's a leap of faith. Like I am going to be willing to move forward in this values-driven way in the absence of data or certainty about how safe it is or how it's going to go or whether everything's going to be okay, because it matters to me and I want to live a life that is consistent with doing the things that matter to me.
Yes. I love that. It's a great analogy. And, working in the South, there's a lot of faith in my office.
A lot of faith, a lot of religious faith. That's true. All right. We are way over time. Matt, I could talk to you forever. The only process we didn't get to was self as context and the observer self. And that tends to be one that's more hard to talk about and really a thing that you have to do. So maybe we'll have some other episode, but I think we might have had someone on that talked strictly about self as context.
Well,
I'm not sure.
I can give you 60 seconds on self as context, referring to your WWJD or WWOD. You were asking what would Oprah do? And so like letting go of your idea of who you are and expanding it to be something bigger than that by drawing on who you imagine someone else is. So
that perspective-taking piece.
Yeah. The self is a story we tell ourselves. It's a very complicated story that's hard to unravel, but it also can confine us, just like that I'm not good enough thought, or, I don't compare well to my colleague's thought. It's just diffusing thoughts about the self.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. When I do talk about it, I often say it's like kind of another version of diffusion, just about a more specific area.
I read everything for the first 5 years. And I've read the 1999 book 1,000 times. And the chapter on self as context is called Diffusing Self.
Oh, I didn't remember that. I read that a long time ago. Okay. I love it. There you go.
Thank you to all your listeners for listening to us prattle on about this stuff that we're so excited about. I hope you get some excitement about it the way that we do.
That we love. I did have one last question, and that is, do you feel like you need to rename your book, Stop Avoiding Stuff, since earlier you told me that ACT is not avoidance therapy?
I would rename that book for so many reasons, because everyone thinks it's about procrastination. I got on a podcast and I got heckled by the podcaster because I couldn't tell him how to just go get his oil changed.
Oh my God, that is so funny. That is hilarious.
Consider not avoiding when avoiding makes your life miserable. How about that?
There you go. That's the new book title. Yeah. Well, Matt's books are awesome. He has an ACT workbook out with Jen. What's the title of that one again? That's the most recent book.
Yeah. I'll say one thing about that book. It's the Acceptance and Commitment Therapy Skills Workbook. And I pitched it to the publisher as for clinicians because it's adapted from my Praxis course. A lot of the content is. They said they have too many books like that. Make it a workbook. But now I've encouraged people to use it as like a manual with the client to learn ACT when they get out of their first ACT training. And if they've done mine, it kind of maps quite nicely onto it, but doesn't have to do mine. It's a really good book for people, therapists themselves, to learn ACT experientially with the client.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. I think it's an awesome resource for clinicians and for clients who want to do more of this work. Matt, if people want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
MatthewSBoone.com. Matthew 2T.
Boone with an E at the end.
With an E at the end. S as in Sam. There's links to the books. There's some resources there.
Well, we will link to all that in the show notes. We did an episode with Jenna Lejeune about the values book that you brought up earlier in the episode. Yes. So we will link to that as well. Thank you, Matt, so much for being here. I always love chatting with you.
Me too. It's great to see you, Jill.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. You can now listen to our podcast ad-free by becoming a supporter on Patreon. You can link to Patreon on our website or go to patreon.com/offtheclocksite.
If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review and sharing this episode with a friend or an enemy who would enjoy it.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our fabulous newsletter on Substack. Or if you're still addicted to social media, find us on Instagram and LinkedIn.
We'd like to thank our rockstar production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
Now for the boring part. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.